I invite you to come to the side. Nós temos 3 perguntas. I already have 3 questions I will try to formulate, okay? Well, the first one is, you mentioned that it's considered public and undeniable that the Austrian school hit on the causes predicting the crisis while the mainstream has failed. Should be for this reason that the Austrian school takes up more space in the mainstream. How do you see the future of the Austrian school?
I don't think that the Austrian school will easily replace the mainstream within the existing institutional setup. There are some Austrians who think that the way to go is try to infiltrate the universities and take over university departments and so forth. I consider this to be a failed strategy, an illusion. The entire universities are part of this general setup. Universities are there largely, especially in the social science fields. The function of the educational system is to brainwash people. All universities, including the private universities, are by and large funded by states. It is an illusion to think that there's a major difference between private universities and public universities. All private universities are also dependent on government research grants, National Science Foundation money, and so forth. The difference there is a minor one, and I believe what is the more successful strategy is simply build an alternative institutional setup. Something besides the existing university structures, something like the Mises Institute in the United States does with teaching online courses and trying to lure people to simply give up on getting a university education at enormously high cost and instead learning the right way, independent and outside of the given institutional structure.
Okay, another one. You said that the Austrian economists have correctly predicted the crisis, but who was known for such predictions was Nouriel Roubini. Our other speakers here talked about the difficulty of predicting the economy. The Austrian school was able to make such predictions. If the answer is yes, what is your expectation for the US economy and the road for this decade? We will have more scissors during this period?
There were a few economists who did predict the crisis who were not Austrian. But you sometimes can also predict something without having any correct explanation for the prediction. There are always some people are lucky in their predictions. I'm not too familiar with Roubini. All I do know is when it comes to what he suggested how we get out of the crisis, he was part of the same mainstream that I characterized. He also thought banks should be bailed out, easy money and easy credit would be the way to overcome the crisis, which seems to indicate to me that he was lucky in his correct prediction and that the predictions were not based on a correct theory as the predictions were of Austrians. I don't think he has a theory.
The third one. You, as a great teacher of Austrian economy, has classified epistemology as a kind of a branch of praxeology sciences, similar to economics. Could you tell us a little bit more about how it would be functionable, I suppose, giving us some examples?
I have tried, for instance, to do a similar thing that Mises has done for economics, namely to derive the economic system from some simple axiom, that is the axiom of action, to do something similar in the field of ethics. There, the axiom is the axiom of argumentation. Just as Mises says, we begin economics by saying humans act, pursue goals with means in order to reach a more satisfactory state of affairs. When we talk about ethical questions, is something true or false? Is there something like ethics? Is there right and wrong in terms of rules? We also have a starting point from which we can show this starting point cannot possibly be refuted. And this starting point is what some philosophers have called the a priori of argumentation. Because you cannot possibly choose another starting point except the starting point that we talk about these sorts of things. Anybody who would dispute this starting point would be engaged in what is called a performative contradiction. There's anybody who would say, no, the a priori of argumentation is not the correct starting point, would refute himself by himself engaging in argumentation. And then I try to show that there are certain implications involved in arguing with each other. And that an ethical system can be derived from this axiomatic starting point of the a priori of argumentation. This is one area in which I think a similar method as a method exemplified by Mises can be fruitfully developed.
Nós temos uma pergunta da plateia ali atrás. Microfone, por favor, ali.
Okay. I totally agree with your words, and in my ideal world there would be free banking with responsible managers. But given the real world and all the difficulties we have to get there, aren't there limits that checks and balances that limit the damage? Because Zimbabwe or Weimar in Germany are exceptions. Even in Brazil now we have like a inflation target and some competition in a failed god that is democracy, but that limit the analogy of printing machine at home that would do for sure more damage.
Yes, currency competition is of course a way to limit the damage to a certain extent. You see, the worst thing that we can imagine would be we have a world central bank issuing a one world paper currency. By definition, this one world paper currency cannot fall against any other currencies. So it is desirable, as long as we have a commodity money, to have a commodity money that is used on a worldwide scale. Something that was roughly accomplished by the International Gold Standard. The entire world, so to speak, uses gold as money. If, however, we have paper money, then a one world currency is the worst possible situation, and there we should hope for large numbers of different fiat currencies. But you can see that this is something that, of course, governments try to eliminate also. The euro, for instance, was created in order to eliminate competition between currencies in Europe. It was the German mark, which was always the most solid currency, not because of any inherent characteristics of the Germans, but because Germany had twice experienced hyperinflationary conditions, and the German public was very sensitive vis-à-vis the phenomenon of of inflation. And this fact that the German mark was a relatively hard currency and that most European currencies continuously had to devalue their currency against the German mark, this problem was supposed to be solved by creating the euro, and the euro would be, of course, more inflationary than the German mark had been. And the next step, of course, then seems to be, and in this current crisis, it was not an accident that a new debate about this thing arose, namely, shouldn't we create now some super currency with a dollar, euro, yen, some other currencies, and the dream of Keynes and others to create a phoenix or a bancor as the ultimate problem. So we have to oppose this idea of creating a world paper currency, and rather, as long as we have paper currencies, rather hope that there will be large numbers of paper currencies in existence. At the current situation, again, you see, for instance, that the Swiss franc has continuously gained value as compared with the euro and as compared with the US dollar, and is a bothersome for the euro and is bothersome for the US dollar. I'm afraid that the United States will, of course, again, use its power not only to undermine the banking secrecy laws in Switzerland. They have already done this. They might go further at one point and try to force a world currency on us. I hope it will not come to that point. But currency competition is the best way to reduce the danger that you mentioned.